Okay, hi. So today I'm going to be tier ranking all the fantasy that I read in 2024, including sci-fi as well. So I read a few other books that have some magical leanings in them, but they felt like they were much more within another genre, which is why I didn't add them to this list. But fantasy specifically, and also a little bit of sci-fi, makes up a majority of my reading. So this is going to be a little bit of an adventure. So let's go through the tier rankings from bottom to top. So the lowest ranking is it's going to be a no for me. These are books that really just did not vibe with me and I don't like them. And there is at least one very popular book that will be in this category. Okay, next one up is I'm conflicted. It's a negative experience with the read, but I appreciate some qualities in the book. The next one, it's a book and I read it. These are books that I feel very neutrally about. Next one, I'm into it. These are the books that I like, but I don't love. I still have some qualms with them, which I'll probably discuss here. And then the top rated is it's time for a deep dive. I could have already done a deep dive on the author, but it just kind of means I want to explore the author more. I'm interested in them. I want to see what their backlist is like, etc. I am going to be including books on this list that I have, or series on this list that I have in many forms of completion. So I'm going to be ranking books together within the same series. So if I read the whole series, I'll be looking at it as one unit. And there's a lot of books on here that I haven't finished the series on. So maybe when I do this next year and I have finished the series, I'll have different thoughts and it'll maybe tread up or down in the rankings. But this is how I feel about the series thus far with how much of it I've consumed. Okay, I think without further ado, let's just get into the books. So the first one is the Greenbone Saga, which for me includes Jade City and Jade War. This is just all these books are in order I read them in. This one is interesting for me because it is a very popular series on BookTube. It's kind of like a more modern setting, not like this ye old fantasy setting. The magic system is interesting. It's a lot about family dynamics. It's very mafia-esque. And overall, I find them to be interesting. But I have, for whatever reason, not continued on with the series. I finished this, I think, on the 1st of January 1st of 2024. So it's been an entire year since I've touched the series, and I actually read the first chapter of Jade Legacy, and one of the characters did something that was just really gross and out of character for them. And I'm listening to this series with my partner, and we both just looked at each other and were like, ew, I don't want to read this right now. I don't want to see this character be something I don't want them to be. Overall, I would say I'm into it, but it's not compelling me to pick it up. It's very uncommon for me to let a series languish for this long. I think I'm going to put this in... I'm into it. The Golden Compass, which is part of a trilogy that I can't think of the name of. I did a reading vlog on this book where I questioned if this is a book that people like because of nostalgia or because it's actually a good series, because I never read it when I was a child, and I didn't like it. You can watch that video, I'll link it. But overall, I just didn't find this enjoyable. I didn't feel like it aged well. I didn't feel like it was complex at all in nature. It was very straightforward in what was happening, and it was just things were getting out of the protagonist's way, and I don't really like books like that. So yeah, it's gonna be a no for me. Yeah. Okay. The next one is the Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb. This is a reread for me. I love The Realm of the Elderling. It's my favorite series of all time at this point. I don't think that the Farseer trilogy is actually my favorite series within The Realm of the Elderling, although it would be high up there, I do prefer, like, if I look at the books in totality, I prefer the Fitz arc to the other arcs. But I think that Live Ship still has it beat out from a series to series perspective. This is going to be, it's time for a deep dive. I love this series so much. The next one is Mislaid in Parts Half Known by Seanan McGuire. This is within the Wayward Children series. That's the name of it. And overall, I didn't include all of the other books in the series because it's very long. I think this is like book maybe 6 or 7 or 8. I don't know. I just kind of read them as they come out, but they feel like a lot of them can read kind of standalone. I think that honestly, I can barely remember this one. I believe that it's one where it's following a character from the last series, but she's like, it's kind of like the gang's back together. So in this series, things can be read as standalone. Some of them have to be read in order. But overall, it's like about kids finding doors into other worlds that like match them. And then some of them stay there and you watch those kind of stories develop, and it's kind of about some of them finding their doors, some of them getting kicked out of their doors, and then there's kind of books amongst those of like these wayward children living together in these institutions and having their gripes in the real world and like having conflict and stuff in the real world. Those are the ones that I like the least because I feel like Seanan McGuire as an author is not very good at writing like large scale dialogue with a lot of people in it. It always kind of feels a little stilted to me and unrealistic. I don't remember this really. So I'm going to put it in, it's a book and I read it. The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. So this is the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty Quartet. This one is a challenge for me because it was overall a very ambitious book. It's setting out to follow a lot of different storylines. It's kind of setting up this dynasty that exists in the context of this world. It's kind of based on this like imperialism that occurred with this king who like bound all these different societies with different cultures together. And then these societies in kind of rebelling against that because they never really all tuned in to be one society. And you're following two main characters who are very different from each other and are from different places and have different backgrounds. And you're following their coming together and then they're kind of falling apart in the context of this larger war with a lot more characters and a lot of dynamics going on. So overall, like I can find the books themselves fairly impressive, but I wasn't overall like just a huge fan of it. I didn't really love any of the characters. I didn't really love a lot of the conversations around femininity and women that it was having within this book. It kept feeling like it was like trying to break out of these patriarchal conventions and then it would like draw itself back in within the same sentence. So like it was hard for me to tell if that was intentional or not. And I did end up starting the second book and I DNF'd it, and I can't tell if that's a forever DNF, but it felt like because it goes back in time a little bit and is telling the story of this character that had no introduction in the first book. And so you're learning about a sequence of events that happened during the first book. And it really just felt like to me that the author didn't think of this storyline until after writing the first book, because there weren't even like clues to this person's presence in the first book, and it was just so widely like it was so epic that it was like it felt weird that like that he couldn't have remembered to include this person in. So it felt like it was like trying to rewrite history a little bit there. Not in a way where it was not like following canon. I never really got past that storyline. So yeah, overall, I'm going to just say I'm conflicted with this book. I could be convinced to reread it or to try it again. I would have to know that the series goes out with like a really good bang and has like a really great conclusion, because I just don't love it enough to keep trudging along, because those are very thick books. Okay, the next one is the Dreamblood Duology by N.K. Jemisin. I've interacted with N.K. Jemisin books multiple times at this point. I've read multiple other, well, I think I've only read one series by her and then a short story collection. She is a type of author that really just drops you in and just makes you learn. So she can be hard to get into. This universe is, I think the magic system is kind of set around the concept of the four humors, and like these humors are like dream blood, and they can be used in different ways around dreams and in healing and in hurting. Overall, I think the magic system is really cool. The duology itself has 2 books, one following like the corruptness of the empire, or this part of the empire, I guess. It's not really an empire. It's kind of like it's much more small in scale, I guess, because it really only feels like this one city, but this city with a lot of rules and rules around the magic and who can use magic and what happens in that city. And if you stay in this city, you can be, I don't remember what the term is, but like taken in the night, where like one of these Dreambloods, like a specific type that wields a specific type of the magic, can like kind of like suck your soul out via your dreams, and it's in order to keep the city going in some context. You kind of follow that in the first book, and you're following a protagonist who is one of these people and his apprentice, and then in the second book it's 10 years later, and you're kind of seeing what happens when societies overturn like that. And I thought structurally that was really interesting. I think that you have to be ready to learn about these new characters again. Like you're learning about totally new characters in the second book. There are some that are the same, but overall you have to like become engaged in new characters. But I liked those new characters. I liked the storyline in the second one as well. I liked that it was kind of critiquing society at large in both books, and I thought there was a lot of nuance in it. This isn't one of her more popular series, but overall I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to say I'm into it, and I am going to put it above Jade City for now. The next one is the First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. This is such a popular series, and I am so conflicted about it, to be honest. I find that Joe Abercrombie is like clearly a very good writer. He is really good at structuring a plot. He did one of the things that I really love in a trilogy, which is where you continuously kind of grow the world and the circumstances in each book, so that the first book has like this smaller conflict with the notion of these other conflicts that might come up later, and then he continues to build up the world in that way. And you just feel like you're getting more and more with each book. Yeah, I really liked that part of it. I also thought he did a good job in terms of like character working and feeling like there was balance between the characters. All the protagonists felt very different. This is grimdark. Everyone talks about how he writes really like unlikable characters. And that is true. They are very unlikable. I have a hard time with books like this because it was written in third person, but I consider it's not an official term, but like a close third person, where you're not reading in someone's mind, but like you have a lot of insights. It's not an I. It's not written in the I, but you have a lot of insights into how someone thinks and feels, and like you're kind of in their mind without being in a first person. However, there's just so much sexism and ableism that doesn't feel like it's coming from those close narrations. It feels like it's just bleeding through the text. And I just find it really icky, to be honest. Like, I find, and people can contest how I feel about this, but I just, when, like, I don't know, coming from a white man in an imperialistic society, just like imbuing that type of stuff in that text, like without nuance and without much critique, just doesn't really sit well with me. And then that also happens, I think, with the female characters. I just feel like they were not fleshed out at all. And they could have been, like, there is one female protagonist that you follow. I didn't find that we ever got into the depths of her and her motivations. Like, we know what her motivations are, but I don't know, she was, I don't want to say flatter than some of the main protagonists, but I don't know. And then there were other female characters that were literally there just for the male characters' ambitions and like needs in terms of getting the plot across. And I just think that we're too close to current times when this was written for that to be acceptable. So clearly I have a lot of negative things to say about this, but I am conflicted because, like, he is a good writer. And some of me wants to continue reading this series, but there's a lot of things I have to overlook in order to enjoy them. Okay, the next one is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. So I was in a huge reading slump in, like, I want to say like April, May, and this brought me out of the reading slump just because I've read them before and it was just easy reading. But if you can see down below, it only shows Twilight and New Moon, and it's because I always end up getting to there and being like, okay, these are like bad, but they're not like that bad. And then I get to Eclipse, and Eclipse is just, it's just that bad. Like it just gets, like, this is the one where, sorry, spoilers, but like, I don't think anyone cares. This is the one where like Jacob like forces himself on Bella and like will not let go of a kiss when she is clearly giving all the physical signs, not just the verbal signs, that she is not interested in that. And I just don't appreciate that in young adults literature. I read this as a young adult and I did not see that as wrong at the time because it was not told to me on the page it was wrong. And as an adult, I don't need that told to me, but as a young adult, you definitely need to have that type of conversation on the page. And then this is also the one where Bella wants to go see Jacob and what's his name? Edward just like takes the something, I can't think of what it is right now, out of her car so her car can't run. It's just, so she can't get there. And I'm like, oh, that's an abusive relationship. So yeah. So like it should be a no for me, right? But like I read them. So we're going to go at the bottom of it's conflicted. I'm conflicted. Oh, okay. I swear I am going to like books again. There are other really great books on this list, but we're not there yet. So the next one is Empire of Silence. This is the first book in the Sun Eater series. I was so excited to read this. I watched multiple really positive reviews. Daniel Green and Petrick, who I appreciate their insights into books. Oh man. And then I read it and it started off good. And within 200 pages, it was no longer good. So I buddy read this with Mariana and Mariana Moss Books. We kept reading because we kept being like, there is something here that we are not seeing. Now, I'm going to go on a little tangent about my feelings about space novels because they can be challenging for me in terms of colonizing space. Kind of the conversation I was having before with Joe Abercrombie, there can be a lack of nuance when people write books about colonizing space. And I personally feel that way about this book. So the idea of humans colonizing planets, colonizing other alien forms of life, enslaving alien forms of life. It's something that happened on Earth from a historic perspective. And then when it happens in sci-fi, I just personally want sci-fi to have a conversation around that. If you're going to write a book about colonizing space, I need to have that meta conversation about colonizing people, and at least know that the author thought about it. That doesn't happen here. So you follow a protagonist who is just really horrendous for me to read, like a privileged 20-something-year-old boy. I don't even want to say man because he never really acts like it, who like goes through the worst years of his life and hits rock bottom, even though at any point he could like get out of the situation he's in, to prove that he's changed and he's gone on a journey. The plot itself, kind of like the Golden Compass, it's just like anything that could be a blockade in his path just gets pushed out of his way. Anything he needs happens. Anything he wants to happen happens. And then he's so contradictory, even within pages. Like, I understand humans are contradictory and like people are contradictory, and you can have an opinion and then you can have a contradictory opinion and then you can change your opinion. But it was really hard to watch that, and I hated everything about this book. I think it was the only book I read this year that I hated, and I kept pushing through because I was just thinking that something was going to turn it around, because these people that I follow love this book. And I was like, I'm missing something, and I'm still missing it. I don't know where it is. We're going to get into a little bit of romantasy. Slaying the Vampire Conqueror. I already talked about this book a few times in videos, so I don't really want to spend too much time on it. I read for two specific reasons. I wanted to read books about vampires, and I wanted to read romantasy, and this was a romantasy with vampires in it. It didn't really do the vampire thing too deeply, and it was like a mix of romance and like a fantasy element. It was pretty straightforward. It wasn't trying to do too much. It wasn't trying to tell too much. It was just like a very singular mission. But I think that's what it was attempting to do. So for me, it's a book and I read it. Okay, The Paperman. This is, I think, the only kind of literary one I have on the list. This is about a man who, when he was a boy, had an accident and he was turned into paper. And so he kind of lives inside, and then he leaves his hometown without telling anyone, and he heads to the city where his girlfriend from when he was a teenager, before his accident happened, has moved. And it's kind of dystopian in that this city is like it's like this other country or other places attempting to annex the city. He gets there and just a lot of weird shit happens. Like, it was overall like more of a literary book than a fantasy book, but it also didn't really have a lot of thematic content that it was digging super deep into, and it was really weird. So I'm gonna, what am I gonna put it into? See, this is the hard thing about these tier lists, because like, I read this whole series, right? Like, I read the whole First Law series, and I have it in Conflicted, and it's like, it's a book and I read it is like neutral, and like there's a lot more emotion in the I'm Conflicted, which is good. I like that a book gives me a little bit more emotion, but I have it lower down on the ranking, which like feels right and wrong at the same time. But we're going to move on. The next one is the Texiclaan Duology by Arkady Martine. This is another space, not really exploration, but a space novel about colonization and imperialism. You follow your protagonist, who becomes an ambassador from a smaller independent space station, kind of, to this large empire, and the place that she's from really is attempting to maintain its culture, and she is being sent there after the current ambassador has died under unforeseen and strange conditions. And so there's the politics of her being there and a culmination of events in the first book. And then the second book, kind of something happens at the end of the first book that kind of prompts the plot of the second book. And this is a book that I really wanted to like a lot more than I did. Like, I really appreciated the project of the book more than I liked the book itself. It really just felt like Arkady Martine had so many ideas, and she tried to do them all instead of really focusing in. I liked this duology. I enjoyed it. I understand why people like it. One of the things that I found challenging with this duology was authorial intent. A lot of the time when I read, I kind of ponder what the author's intent is, and if it feels like that's what it's doing. And I felt like the author's intent, based on of like the quotes that she put at the beginning of the book, was to talk about the contradiction of imperialism and empire and the people who kind of are on the outskirts of that, but like also want to be in it. And that kind of happens, but it gets lost in the sauce a little bit in terms of like what story she wanted to tell. She kind of expanded out a little too far. I feel like she could have either like tightened up the plot a little bit more and made the series shorter, made each book a little bit shorter, or she could have added pages on and really expanded these into a larger series and like kind of hit on the points that she wanted to hit on, because you get a lot of like different characters introduced in the second book, and they become important and imperative to the plot, but you never really dive super deep in with them. But overall, I did enjoy the books. Like, I don't want to act like I didn't like these ones, because I absolutely did. So I'm going to put this into I'm into it, but I'm going to put it below. Yeah, I'm going to put it below J War. Okay. So the Spellshop by Sarah Beth Durst is being called a romantasy, but there's like a certain type of romantasy that's like popular, and I would say this doesn't really check those boxes as much. This is cozy. It's like following this woman who was a librarian in a town, and then the town gets like taken over by a different place, and she's like not noticing it happening until like the library is burning down. And her best friend is a spider plant, really her only friend, and she gets away on a boat, and she ends up back at her home island, and she tries to reintegrate, but she doesn't really want to because she doesn't know how to interact with people. And the books that she saved from the fire were spell books, and maybe it's banned to use spells, and maybe she starts kind of using them. Maybe there's a guy that lives a little down the way who keeps trying to like help her out, and she's not that interested, but maybe he's kind of cute, and that's where you get the romance part. But it's a lot about like making community and becoming community, and then there's kind of some echoes of the things that happened at the city that come to the island. I liked this a lot. I thought it was really fun. There's times where the writing was like almost at my borderline of cheesiness, but overall I really liked it. I wouldn't say that it's time for a deep dive, because this didn't make me want to read this whole author's backlist. But like, I'm into it. I think I might, no. Do I like this more than the Dreamblood duology? I think so. I've thought about it more. Ooh, okay. The Halfling Saga by Melissa Blair, which is allegedly a big TikTok or book series. I read all 3 of the books that have come out in the series so far. The 4th book comes out in like a week. And this series was not good. It had very little plot. It had characters going through the same problems over and over again. It had plot holes all over the place. It was kind of the book that I needed to read in the moment. I was working on a paint by numbers, and I just sat and painted for hours while listening to this very surface level book, and they annoyed me by the end, but I got sucked in. So it's bad, but I'm still gonna finish it, which kind of makes me feel like it has to go, and I'm conflicted, because if it's gonna be a no for me, then I wouldn't finish the series, but it has to be below Twilight, I think. Yeah, Twilight has more nostalgia associated with it, and I prefer the movies, actually, of Twilight to the books. Okay. This is going to be a really long video. Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is her vampire book. It takes place in Mexico City, a different Mexico City. I talk about this in my vampire video, which I'll link because I go into more detail than I will here. I found this really fun. This is like the exact type of vampire book I wanted to read. It's vampires in your face. There's a lot of vampire lore. She makes up her own vampire lore. It all makes sense in terms of her placing this into Earth. I liked that all the vampires had different powers. I liked the interactions between the vampires and the humans. I liked like the seedy Mexico City atmosphere, and I had a lot of fun with this. So I think it's time. I've read other, I'm putting it in, it's time for a deep dive. I've read other Silvia Moreno Garcia, and I didn't really like it. I read Mexican Gothic and hated it, but I really hated the audiobook, so that could have been part of it. Maybe I'm going to put it at the top of I'm into it, because it's time for a deep dive is like very like special in terms of sci-fi fantasy for me. We will continue on. So the next one is the John Gwynne series. It's a trilogy. I can't think of the name of it, which has A Time of Dread and A Time of Blood. And then the last one is A Time of Courage, which I have not picked up yet. This is a sequel series to, what is it called? The Faithful and the Fallen, which I have right here. And it takes place hundreds of years later, and it's kind of the world that was created out of the first series, which I always like. I like seeing like it feels like this happens with Mistborn too, where it's like all the characters are like, we did it. We made the world that we all want to live in. And then you go hundreds of the years in the future and you ask the question, was this the world you wanted to make? I love that. So that's what this book is doing, and it's doing it in the same capacity as The Faithful and the Fallen. Definitely do not read the synopsis for this series if you have not read The Faithful and the Fallen and you do not want to be spoiled, because you definitely will be. So just keep that in mind. This is a sequel series, and you will be spoiled immediately. So overall, it does it in the same capacity as The Faithful and the Fallen, where you're following a bunch of different protagonists from all over, and like then they start kind of coming together. I like this, but it hasn't left as big of an impression for me so far as The Faithful and the Fallen. So I'm gonna put it in. I'm into it. I'm more likely, honestly, to pick it up than Jade War or Jade Legacy. So I'm going to put it into I'm into it above that, and we'll see where it lands in the rankings once I'm finished with the series. I'm going to try to finish Jade Legacy in 2025, so it'll be interesting to see where these land. Okay, Upscaled. This is a self-pub, and it is kind of doing that cozy fantasy thing, very singular in what it's attempting to accomplish. You're following a few kids. They live in this town. Dragons are outlawed, and they stumble across a dragon egg, and kind of like things ensue, and there's an adventure. And for me, just the writing didn't really work. I think that it could have gotten a few more editing rounds. I know self-pub, that can be hard, but a lot of the writing kind of annoyed me, and the dialogue annoyed me. So yeah, but it's going to be a no for me. I didn't like this. But I'm going to put it above the Golden Compass. Okay. No, I'm not. I didn't like that. Okay. Which I feel bad saying because it's self-pub, but it has high reviews on Goodreads. So what do I know? All of my it's going to be a no for me is have high reviews on Goodreads. Okay, next one, Day Zero by Robert C. Cargill. This is a prequel to Sea of Rust, which I have not read, but you can read this as a standalone. This is an apocalypse novel where it's futuristic. So this is a sci-fi where you have AI, like robots that are part of daily life. You have home ec ones, you have like nanny ones, and they're kind of everywhere. And while this is happening, there is a group of robots who have gotten their freedom that build a city, and something happens, and it kind of takes off from there with you're following this nanny and the boy that the nanny protects, a nanny bot. So he's like a tiger. He looks like a tiger. Was it sometimes slamming you over the face with its ideology? Yes, it was. But I loved this book. This book made me cry. It was just touching. I loved the themes. You'll find that with me with sci-fi. I like being hit over the head with the thematic content. It doesn't bother me really at all. And so I loved this. So I'm going to say it's time for a deep dive. I can recognize that the things that I put in It's Time for a Deep Dive have flaws, with the exception of Robin Hobb, and I will hear no Robin Hobb slander here. But yeah. Okay, The Teller of Small Fortunes. This is a beautiful cover. Cozy fantasy. I guess I should probably make a video about my taste testing cozy fantasy because I've read a lot of it this year, and I feel like for me, one of the things that is hardest with cozy fantasy is like the cheesiness or like the kishness of some of the writing, where it just feels a little overbearing. I feel like that happens in this book. You're following this fortune teller, and she is from a different country, and she emigrated when she was young to this country, and that's very uncommon. So she kind of goes from town to town in these rural areas, and she is people look at her, like people stare at her. There's like kind of like this underlying like racism that kind of happens throughout the books, and a lot of like micro and macro aggressions that happen to her. But it's like a found family. She finds people along the way, and they bring their own kind of needs and conflicts, and that kind of pushes the plot forward. But then tells small fortunes, but she's hiding something. This kind of becomes a quest novel partway through, and I kind of hated that. I feel like it wanted to kind of make something happen. It wanted to plot up the plot, but for me, it felt like it was someone writing a D&D campaign, and like your characters are all getting to know each other, and then it's like, and then your dungeon master drops a quest in, and it for D&D, it's fun. You're like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go on a quest now. But for a book like this that was so slow and meandering, it just felt out of place, and then it felt like everything was rushed at the end and cheesy. So I think it was cute enough, but I would say I would put it in I would say I put it in as a book and I read it. I didn't love it. See, this is where I keep going back and forth on this I'm conflicted section, because overall, I think that some of these books I have in I'm conflicted are a lot better constructed, but I'm going to stop commenting on that. That's how I chose to make these. Okay, the next is The Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. This is a book that feels almost historic, but it's definitely fantasy, and it's taking from Irish, it even says it's British versus Irish within the books, but it takes liberties with that. And you're following this girl, and she has 6 older brothers and a dead mother and a father who is around, but he's mainly off fighting the wars. And her her brothers are slowly but surely going to fight this, and one of her brothers kind of disagrees with things and lets a prisoner go free, and that kind of starts off Sorsha, your protagonist's trajectory. Then this is based off of like the Seven Geese. I'll put it up on screen. Some sort of old tale that I was not super familiar with. I really enjoyed this book. Were there things that I didn't like? Yes. But the vibes were everything for me. It reminded me so much of Robin Hobb in her writing, her style, in like the way that she expressed place and feeling and identity on the page. There's definitely a romantic interest or a romantic element that develops in the books that I personally would have liked to have seen gone in a different direction. But like overall, this book just made me feel so much, and I'm excited to continue reading the series. So I'm going to put it in, it's time for a deep dive. I think I'm going to put it above Day Zero. Okay, next. Oh my goodness, so many books. I read A Winter's Promise. This is the first book in a quartet. It is translated from the French, and this book gets a lot of really low ratings. You follow this younger adult, I think. Her age really is never specified, and I think that's why people really struggle with this, because she's getting married off and she's being sent to a different part of this world, and the world is quite interesting. There was an event, like a cataclysmic event that happened that shattered the world hundreds of years ago, and now everyone lives on these like isolated pieces of land that you have to like fly in between. The world building is very interesting, and I enjoyed it a lot. And then you have your protagonist who is clumsy and young and naive and does not want to be married off, and gets sent to this court that could very easily eat her alive. And you follow her as she starts to understand the politics and the intrigue. I think that the way that this was done was quite interesting and made it took it from an interesting angle. I guess I'll leave it at that. I am very interested to keep going. I'm partway through the second book right now, and like I'm like getting annoyed with the protagonist. And I think that people like don't know how to classify this, because she has to be chaperoned everywhere, and so you kind of question, is she super young? I think the writing comes across as a bit younger, so like, is this more of a YA? I personally read it more of like cusp into adult. Like, I think it could be read for a YA audience, but I'm not sure how much intention was put into who this book was made for. I don't know how French publishing works, so I don't know if it's like as stringent as it is in US and UK publishing. I like this. I'm into it. I'm going to put it... I'm going to put it right here for now. It could very easily fall depending on where the series goes. Okay, the last one I'm going to talk about is what is it called? Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is sci-fi. This is his first in this sci-fi quartet, and you're following Spensa, who wants to be a pilot, and her father is disgraced, and so she's come across a lot of challenges with that, and then you follow her journey of becoming a pilot and like the challenges that happen. This is written for a YA audience, but like Brandon Sanderson is like killing characters off right and left. But characters that maybe you don't care about as much, and then characters that like I was starting to feel for in some capacity. And then the ending of the book like kind of lands you with like a really great jump off point. I really like Brandon Sanderson, so I love how he builds a story. I kind of like throughout the book, people might like this or might not, but Spensa has this kind of relationship with this male character who also wants to become a pilot. Them together give off like Rin and Neja energy from the Poppy War trilogy, but like take the notches down quite a bit in terms of like meanness of them, but like he's rich and she's like had all these things like put in her way, and like it seems like he has everything he wants, but does he? Overall I liked this book a lot. I'm gonna say that I'm into it. I don't want to say time for a deep dive because like I've already done a lot of Brando Sando, and this is definitely not one of my favorites, but where do I want to put this? It's hard to rank when I haven't finished things, but where I'm feeling at it so far, I think, do I like it more than Dreamblood? It took me a lot longer to read Dreamblood, but I don't think that should be a part of my opinion. Yeah. Does this feel right? Those are all my books. I feel like this kind of looks interesting. I'll be interested to see where things fall or like rise or fall when I've actually finished these series. But I had a lot of fun ranking these. So I think that's all I have for this video. Let me know if there's any of these series that I should definitely continue pursuing, or if there's like secondary series like The First Law that you think I should persevere and continue reading. But that is all I have. So until next time, happy reading.